Stop spending your money on stupid shit.
Please, 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 you. Oh, yes. Yes. Yes, 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 yes. We won the 50-50. Yes.
Oh, I might spend all tickets and get... Oh, let's go. Okay, perfect. I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. I'm done.
I can get a little bit into it, right?
조금은 몰입해도 괜찮겠지?
Yu Soo-hyun is the best fire DPS in solo leveling a Rise.
And she is just cracked all around. We talked about the upgrades you want to do.
If you plan to be competitive, this is the reason why I said don't skip Yu Soo-hyun.
I know y'all were waiting for that. Okay guys, it's about time. I'm making a video about the highly anticipated weapon ascension tier list. The camera is now placed to the top right instead of the usuals for better visibility with the elements, starting with the dark element and then moving forward with the other elements, ranking everyone, giving you my thoughts on where they rank on the tier list. Very simple. Even at A0, it's already useful. That's why it's in the middle, because it has slight buffs. But starting with A1, it gets a lot better because we're now getting amplifying draw, where the next attack has increased damage, skill damage, and crit damage as well. That's why it's in the 90. At A3, it solidifies its precision with the ability to just dash into the amplifying draw effect. And obviously with the A5, you now get additional dark damage, and also you can now stack up the full bloom effect, and not the full bloom, the Plum fire effect, up to 5 times, which further increases your crit damage. This weapon is used no matter where you go, unless the only time you don't use Plum is if you do guild boss with a support build. Other than that, you always use Plum. That's why this weapon is ranked the way it is. I think it is perfectly fitting that Plum is just the magnum opus of the game. Also created issues for the game, to be honest. The weapon is so good that one weapon slot is always locked for Plum when you play Jinwoo, and that makes your builds not as versatile as you would hope it to be. My personal opinion is they should, with the Jeju Island update, add a third weapon slot for Jinwoo to spice things up, to make Jinwoo's kit more versatile, because Plum is really way too strong. Next up we have Moonshadow, which is also a problem for this game, which I just mentioned, and that is also the reason why I believe a third slot would be good for the game, because it's mostly Jinwoo's damage is coming from his skills, because the weapon multiplayers aren't as great. And for Moonshadow, it's very simple. A0 weapon is completely useless. Starting with A1, it gets better because now we can get 3 instances, the full moon, and now you can ramp up the damage to 45%. But the weapon gets a lot better starting with A3, where you can actually use your shadow stab to just apply to get that effect, the debuff, where the enemy takes 15, 30, 45% increase the damage. So now you can shadow stab, because that effect also only lasts for 3 seconds. So realistically speaking, there's only one skill or attack you can use to follow up. But with this combination, with the shadow stab, you can now shadow stab, dash, for example, into a powerful skill, and then you can use Moonshadow weapon skill ability to get another 3 seconds. So you know, get in total 6 seconds instead of just 3 seconds. And the F5 version just makes it very solid all around, because at this point now when you use the weapon skill, you now get another 15% increased damage while the time is slowed down. So now you get a 60% damage increase, which makes it very powerful. I rank the weapon just slightly above below Plum. You could argue that it's like this, both these weapons are at 100. You know what, I was trying to make the argument that only Plum deserves that character, but to be honest, Moonshadow is the same thing as Plum. Way too powerful, You can literally use it everywhere you want. There might be some situation, like very situational situations, where you don't want to use that weapon, for example, and then try something else. But overall, it's just on the same level. And if you just run this combo, you can, with any content you're playing, this is more than good enough. Next up, we have the Scythe. The Scythe was always a solid weapon overall, but the main problem with the Scythe is that the damage is just not good enough. The animation takes too long. You do not have super armor, so you are not even protected while you're doing the entire animation. I really enjoy this weapon overall. It's very cool, but you cannot really make use of it. It has some sort of niche use though, because when you're in recipe, for example, you're doing power of strength, right? The good thing about this weapon is when you drop below 75, you now get a 25% crit rate boost, so you can theoretically use the Scythe as a support weapon. And when this weapon is at a 5, you now take 15% more damage, but you get a 15% attack boost, which is interesting because it has a use in power of strength. For example, when you do Iberg or something, when they have shields, because if you use the skill Dagger Toss Electric Shock, which scales of true damage of your attack value, you can now use the Scythe, because the Scythe just boosts the attack of, or the damage of, your electric shock. Now comparing the Zeke spear to the Scythe, that's the best comparison you can get. Like at A0, they are basically more or less the same, these two weapons. But starting with A1, where this weapon gets a boost to its damage, it's getting already a little bit better than the Scythe. And with the A3, where you can use the Zeke's weapon, where it has faster animation, and if you use the weapon damage sequentially, you get even a 2% cooldown reduction, and the animations of Zeke's spear are just a lot faster. Now at A5, it's where this weapon gets very powerful, because now it just further increases all the damage that it's dealing. That is why it's like here in the at the high tier category at 90. I wouldn't rank it above because, I mean, Plum and Moon. That's all you need to say about these two weapons, right? I mean, if you think about it logically, then you will understand why it makes sense to not rank even a 5 version of it higher than that, because you can use A3 Moon and Plum, for example, with Max Slash, and you'd be like, yeah, why should I use Zeke when I can just bring Moon, right? So that's the big issue for these direct DPS weapons. As I just said, Jinwoo just needs a third weapon slot. I know now the biggest surprise is actually Demon King Longsword. This weapon, I knew from the get-go, this weapon will get buffed till it is a good weapon. So I wasn't worrying too much about this weapon because I knew there will be a time for it to shine. Now, for the ascensions of the Demon King Longsword at A0, it's kind of whatever, to be honest. At A1, it gets just tiny bit better. Nothing too crazy. That's why it's still very fair in the bottom tier category, low tier category. Now with the A3, in my opinion, A3 Demon King Longsword is already better than A3 Zeke Spear, just because you now don't have to successfully counterattack anymore. You get a lot of these lightning hits, which deal a lot of damage, to be honest. They deal a lot of damage. It has a lot of versatility. It provides a shield, everything you really need. It has stun, and at A5 you now get that 1600% multiplier on that final hit when you get a successful counterattack. It's also very easy to use. It's not that difficult, and only if you want to time that final bolt you just need to counter. But this thing has so much survivability that I cannot rank it anywhere lower, and in my opinion it's just also better than Zeke Spear. Also, you have to think about the fact that, and it's actually very simple, because from damage testing and stuff like that, the West Wind dealt more damage than Zeke Spear when you did Guild Wars, for example, and the Demon King Longsword does now more damage than West Wind. So that's why, very simple, Demon King Longswords takes the spot here. Very happy with this weapon where it went. So next up we have the Baran Daggers. Finally we got a more accurate weapon for Jinwoo in the game, an SSR version of the game. Baran Daggers, very hyped for this one. Got it to A5, tested it, and this is how I rank it. Like, it's nothing too crazy, and that's usually the trend with these weapons. Like at A0 they aren't too crazy. If I rank a weapon at A0 already at 75 and not banish it to the Shadow Realm, that's already good enough saying about the weapon, to be honest. But starting at A1, it gets a little bit better because it now provides that lightning rush effect to itself to further buff the damage of this weapon, which is a skill damage increase. Now with the A3 effect, it gets a lot of buffs. This is why this weapon is pushed up to the max at this point. Actually, let me make that adjustment here. I rank it at 90, but it's like around this area here. But at A3, it now scales off your strength as well, provides more damage. And now you need less concentrating lightning stacks to get the lightning rush effect, and you get 2 instances of lightning rush immediately, which further increases the damage of the dagger of the Baran Daggers. And at A5 it completely goes hog wild and completely boosts the damage to a crazy amount, and that catapults it to the top of the 90 list. I was contemplating between the Baran Daggers and the Demon King Longsword. What I thought was the better weapon, because if you just look from a damage perspective, then yes, the Baran Daggers are better than the Demon King Longsword. But the thing is, with the Demon King Longsword, it is easier to handle, and the Baran Daggers have weird targeting. You have to be at the right distance. You cannot be too close to the enemy, you cannot be too far to the enemy. Sometimes the hits connect, sometimes they don't, sometimes just completely goes 180 in a different direction. This weapon currently has a lot of targeting issues, and that's why I was contemplating if currently the Demon King Longswords are slightly better, because the Demon King provides you also with more utility. You have that lightning effect, you have that 50% shield, which is huge. But I ultimately decided to still give Baran Daggers the slight edge over the Demon King Longsword. Next up, we have the Huntsmen pistols. At A0, it's not useful at all, so it's in the Shadow Realm. With the A1, it now gets its use because it now provides you the break effectiveness you need, plus the destroy ability when you break an enemy, provide you an additional 8% effect. A3 just gets slightly better. It gets the hold effect, which is basically a CC for a couple of seconds. And at A5, it's where it's about, because now at A5 you get also the destroy set, now not a 8% but a 16% effect now, and it can stack up more often than not. Plus also they buffed the Huntsman slightly, because now outside of the break bar you can now land an additional stack of the destroy effect that guarantees you at least a 16% increased damage, but only if there is a break bar. And if there's no break bar, you can at least get a guaranteed 8% destroy effect out of this weapon. The damage of that weapon is decent for what weapons are, but it's nothing really too game breaking right now. The biggest use of it is as utility if you're looking to destroy break bars really quick, and if you struggle to a certain degree of breaking, this weapon helps a lot. It's not good enough to be in the high tier or top tier category. It's in the middle. Super solid weapon all around, but nothing too crazy. Next up, we have the Phoenix Soul. At A0, it's whatever. A1, it's where you need the weapon at least, because starting there you get the core effect of the weapon, because after using the weapon skill you can now follow up with the Fire Soul core attack, which helps a lot. With the A0 it has some issues. The A3 is where it gets a lot better, because now instead of getting 2 instances you get 4. You can get up to 4 instances now of the Phoenix Soul stacks. So you have now with the A3 version 4 instances of the Firebird Soul instead of just 3, which further increases the core attack damage of that weapon. And at A5, after using that entire thing, you now get your Phoenix Soul stacks back, so you can use the core attack a second time. And this just makes the weapon a lot better. The weapon becomes very versatile, starting with A3, and then with the A5 becomes very good. That's why it's high tier, but I couldn't rank it higher than that, to be honest. And what I personally like about the Phoenix Soul overall is the fact that this weapon has a lot of reach. Like, all the other weapons have limited reach, but the Phoenix Soul actually has quite some decent reach. It has a lot of distance, and you can use it from a safe area, which makes this weapon one of the better weapons for Jinwoo overall. On tier slight adjustment, I think A3 Phoenix Soul is a little bit better than the Zeke Spear at A3. Now next up we have Vulcan's Rage. Vulcan's Rage might surprise you. Standard with A0, A1, nothing, no one uses that weapon. Now starting with A3, this is where the difference comes, because starting with A3 you get a buff where you get a 20% attack increase for Jinwoo and you get a 10% attack speed increase for Jinwoo. The A5 doesn't change too much, but the really important effect is the A3 effect, because after watching the SLA tournament, which was in Korea, that one guy, because there's a pick and ban phase for weapons and a lot of the meta weapons were banned overall, there was that one player who used the Vulcan's Rage as a support weapon and won the entire tournament because of his Vulcan's Rage. Because when you cannot all use the other weapons, you can now use Vulcan's Rage as your support weapon go-to, and that's why I rank it here around 80. It's still a bad weapon, but you know what, if we get the tournament mode, then it might be a decent option to pick, because in most cases the meta options will be banned. Next up we have Skadi. Skadi overall is just bad. I don't know why you would ever want to use that weapon. It's bad. It has like a nice sounded, oh, increased damage here, increased damage there, but you know what, you can just use Plum. This weapon literally does nothing for you. There's no damage, the freeze is whatever, the utility is whatever. Weapon itself does not offer a single use for you currently in the game where this one could be relevant. The only place where you could use that weapon is maybe Battlefield of Chaos, and only because you feel like, oh, I want to use 2 water weapons, and that's about it. Not even because that the weapon is good there, it's just because, oh, I just want to use it there because I don't use it anywhere else, right? It's this weapon is just, this will need a huge buff, because in my opinion, worst weapon in the entire game together with the Vulcan's Rage. Even though Vulcan's Rage is slightly better because starting as a free, I just mentioned, you know, yeah, that's for that weapon. Now last but not least, the Thetis Grimoire, very simple weapon. A0, it's usable but doesn't do anything else. But now starting with A1, this weapon immediately jumps to the top of the 90 category, because now at A1 you get that debuff, that weakness elemental effect to 24%, which is very, very powerful, especially if you look at the guild boss with the Moon Shadow and the Thetis Grimoire combo. And now this weapon just gets better from this point on at A3. Now that additional damage when the effect ends is now 20% instead of 10%, and at A5 it's just slightly better, because when you can freeze a target, the damage is increased by 50%. While the A5 effect is very powerful in itself, it's hard to get it off, but if you can, this is very, very powerful. Actually, let me put this up here. The A5 Thetis Grimoire is stronger than the A3 Moon Shadow, because if you can land that one, you now have a 24% weakness elemental effect, plus you have that 20% damage when the effect ends, and when you hit a frozen target, the damage is increased by 50%. So if you follow up with a skill on a target that can be frozen, the damage is actually ridiculous and can rival the Moon Shadow. But that's why it's only at the 95 and not 100, because not every enemy is freezable, and that puts it a little bit. And that's why I had to subtract 1 tier from the Thetis Grimoire. But yeah, guys, this is the entire tier list with all the ascensions for Jinwoo's weapon. Let me know what you guys think, and as well, if you enjoyed watching this video, don't forget to leave a like in the comment down below. I really appreciate it, and see you with the next one. Deuces.